Welcome to the State of Developer Education, a podcast by Major League Hacking. We explore how technical leaders are creatively tackling the developer education gap to help prepare the next generation of technologists for the real world and build businesses that can adapt to any changes in the technology ecosystem. I'm your host, John Gottfried. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the State of Developer Education. I'm John Gottfried, and today I have Viktor Gamov from Kong. How's it going, Viktor?
Hey, John, it's great to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for coming. So to start things off, I always like to ask our guests a little bit about how they got started in tech. So going back many, many years to when you entered the industry, what kind of drove you down that path? What made you decide to work in tech and computer science?
It is actually pretty boring. There's nothing very exciting. So I chose this to do as my specialty very earlier in my life. And when I was not sure how to make money out of the computers, I was just fascinated about computers. My parents who gave me a computer at yes, it's the last 2 years of high school, so I can start prepping for university. And this is where I started like learning this. But before that, my aunt is actually was taking me to her job, and they have a computers there, and I was taking around, and yeah, and I think I decided to make this as my uh, as a profession very early on, and like I don't know, like 25 years after, I'm still enjoying this, and still loving it every day.
That's awesome. Did you have any exposure to kind of like computer science education in high school? Were there any coding classes, anything you did after school that kind of drove that?
Yeah, so we did kind of some basic computer science and the programming stuff, but I enter in the so I originally came from Russia, and our educational structure is slightly different. So like after high school, we go in it's like either university or college. So what we call like higher education. So essentially, when I finished my high school, it was 11 years school, and after that, I went to university to pursue this career with computer sciences. Like was Department of Automating Systems, and the year after, I moved to more software related to specialty. Like I switched my major from automating system to it's called like a mathematical administration of automating systems, but essentially it was formally computer science things. We have like things from some advanced math and advanced calculus to exposure to things like functional programming and traditional object-oriented programming, and learn a lot of things when I start working as a part-time job in it was kind of like a kind of sort of like electric company, and they were doing installation of the electric meters, and I was helping to administrate the system at first, and after that I was starting to develop some software around those, like extending some of the functionality of the system just to make life of the colleagues easier. And the last year, like basically graduating year of my university time, I start internship at the one of the largest bank in Russia, and I start developing the web apps using .NET and ASP.NET. It was the time of the .NET Framework 2.0. So again, very long time. I got the exposed to Microsoft tools very early on, and once I graduated and went for my postdoc, um, I switched completely with the different stack. I switched to Java, and I switched to more like open source world with the Java Enterprise Edition and Tomcat and Spring frameworks and all this kind of stuff. And but still wasn't involved in some of the enterprise stacks like WebSphere, IBM, and stuff. So been in across the spectrum from the fully commercial and privately privately owned development platform to more open and open source.
Yep, you come full circle, just like
Yeah, yeah,
Microsoft, right? Like they
exactly.
started closed and now they're open again too.
Exactly, exactly. They started as a their platform, their .NET platform started as a kind of response for Sun Microsystems suing them for implementing Java, and now Microsoft is one of the biggest computer contributors to Java. They have a very strong developer relations team around Java technology. So, and they trying to make the Azure platform as the place where you run Java apps. So that's ironic and exciting with the
Yeah.
both.
Um, yeah, it's funny. Like I didn't start on .NET, but in high school we were still doing Visual Basic classes, which I thought was like complete magic. You know, like the
Mhm.
idea that you could build an application in this whole environment blew my mind.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, I hope they don't teach Visual Basic anymore. But like, it
I
was
think it's you
really,
still
really
can
cool.
do the stuff around when you're programming some sort of like a macrosis in your Microsoft Excel or something like that. I haven't touched this thing for a while, but I believe that Visual Basic is still a thing on the .NET platform. So .NET platform is the multi-language platform, so you can uh, compile basically any language to .NET bytecode.
Yeah, probably quite a bit more advanced than it was when I used it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so you made this kind of journey, right, from you know these early technologies through Java, through open source, and it's been something like 20 years now in the
yeah.
industry. Um, what do you think has changed compared to when you were learning these technologies for the first time?
Um, yeah, so definitely there is more information right now. Um, so information these days is very well available for everyone who want to start. If you want to start, you can find the tutorials, you can find the places where you can get the answer. I remember my times when the way how you would choose your program language was essentially was up to whoever you have on your speed dial. So if you have your friend who knows C++ very well or knows the Borland C++ and you can do C++ builder and stuff, or you have a Borland Delphi person on your, next to next room or next door. So this is how you start learning because you will ask a lot of questions. The next thing is that you also probably in my time again, I don't want to sound like very old, but still, the situation with the outdated information was quite substantial because a lot of books that were written about certain technology they have to be translated into different languages. Like I said, originally I started from Russia, so some of the books that were popular were also outdated, and some of the things that you learn are obviously fundamentals, but some of the things, some of the APIs, some of the things that you have to learn, you need to start learning the different languages. For example, I was super fascinated when I first time discovered Microsoft MSDN, Microsoft Developer Network. It's their kind of the vast documentation about the Windows API. I was the Windows developer for quite some time. I was developing C++ using like MFC, Microsoft Foundation Framework. Um, the after that there was like ATL library, another library like object-oriented library for writing the desktop apps. Um, the Borland C++ builder helped a lot on kind of like a simplifying the things by abstracting this through framework, the same framework that you use in Delphi, and all those things kind of like you need to spend a lot of time on kind of like a rinse and repeat and learning yourself like what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. So these days it's a little bit easier because you have Stack Overflow, you have all sorts of tools that can bring this immediate answer to your. You just need to ask the right question. Essentially the modern tools like even chat GPT-3, you need to figure out the way how to ask right question, and this is how you get result. In my time, you need to ask right question, but it would be person that knows this, or if person doesn't know, you have to dig it yourself.
Yeah, I had this really distinct memory of getting library books about programming. And a lot
Yeah,
of them came with either floppies or eventually CDs of whatever IDE you needed to compile
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
and like 90% of the time it was like 2 or 3 versions out of date.
Yeah.
And the only way I could figure out later versions was like going on IRC or something and asking, and it was an interesting experience. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot more information at people's disposal now, and it's a
Yeah.
lot more up to date and easy to parse.
Yeah.
But you're still writing books, right? Like you've published a couple of books. How do you
Yeah.
make
So
sure that that
yeah,
same
at this
problem doesn't happen?
at this point, I switched from the reader of the books into a writer of the books. And no, I still read. I still read a lot of books in about the IT business and just in business in general, personal development, and sci-fi. But yes, you're right. I wrote during my careers. I wrote 2 books. One was about enterprise web development, and the second one was released just recently. It's Apache Kafka in action for Manning. I believe um, you can go to kafkainaction.org or stuff like that. Um, so it was very challenging thing. Very similar. Sometimes people comparing this experience with writing something like diploma or thesis um, for your science work. And I explain a couple things here. So why I think it's somehow related. So the couple things that you need to spend a lot of time doing research. You need to know the topic very well, because second thing that you know that many people will look into this one and nitpick and will judge. And especially it's important in the time of internet, because of the reviews. You'll get the bad reviews, or people will like start bad mouthing the some of the typos and some of the problems of the book, and immediately you can get the um, not so favorable sales and things like that. Motivation for writing books though is slightly changed. So for writing books, I never consider this to be a money type of exercise. So I never consider to be, I don't know, J.K. Rowling and writing the books for life and getting millions, because we're writing technical books, and I knew that most of the time the books will outdate the moment they will be republished out of the press. And I have this anecdote, which is not anecdote, it's actually real life thing that happened. So when we're writing this enterprise web development, it was a JavaScript book based on years of consultancy jobs that we did here in New York with my colleagues in my previous company for other systems. And we put a lot of knowledge in terms of like how you would structure very well and very well maintained application. We spent the time explaining the modular structure before modules were officially part of the JavaScript specification. So it was there still was kind of there was AMD, there was CommonJS, and we had to explain this, and it was not these days JavaScript. So this book written was, I don't know, like 7 years ago. Um, and many things that we kind of like showed in the book, they were not available right now. Some frameworks will have this, but it was an anecdote with the testing tool. We put a lot of effort to explain the importance of the testing, unit testing for your application, because JavaScript is not compilable code, and you can break the things if you're not using anything like, I don't know, maybe TypeScript that allows to compile the code before and do all sorts of linting. So the testing that would be way how you can ensure that your application is functionally is correct. We use this framework called Jasmine, and the O'Reilly actually brought up one of the creators of Jasmine framework as a technical reviewer for this book, and he was um, once he did like his run on this testing chapter, he said, "Hey, that's awesome chapter. It's great that you guys put this into the book, but like 2 weeks ago we just released a new version of Jasmine framework. Like API is totally changed. Would you mind to rewrite this so it will be complete with the new framework?" So I totally know that it's mostly for the time when we're doing consultancy. It was just basically help to drive the business, help to drive the clients, and also creates kind of like assurance that we know what we're talking about when we're talking to the customers. And Kafka in Action, it was basically same thing, but for personal brand development. I spent working in the Kafka community. I worked at Confluent for 4 years, and I thought that that would be great milestone um, for my personal career, and I can put the knowledge. So when Dylan Scott, who is one of the co-authors, approached me to help and finish this book, and the book was already in development for quite some time, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. And given the fact that I had experience with the writing the books in the past, so I know that what it takes to push this back book um, through the finish line, basically. And I help to update it again. Source code. The community is super fast paced, and again, the things that were released was around the Kafka 2.x, and now we have already Kafka 3.0. Many things still are relevant, but there's some like new things that came into this book. Maybe require some additional. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard people recommend, writing tutorials or writing blog posts to, showcase your understanding of technology. I think writing a book is probably a different level in that, but
yeah.
I see the same value for you. How do you think like developers should use books as part of their educational journey? Like obviously there's a lot of resources out there. Books are one. Maybe you have online courses, maybe you have, all sorts of different trainings. Like where do books factor in now as an end
Yeah,
user?
it's a very good question. Very good question, John. So, yeah, the books are tricky. So they are expensive. They're expensive to write. They're expensive to buy. And again, given the fact that they outdating like much faster if you're not writing some fundamental stuff. For example, my one of my favorite books on computer science. It's called Designing Data Intensive Application by Martin Klapman. This book is, even though there's some examples of some of the systems, uh, I would say it's still fundamental because it explains a lot of how the systems get built. It reminds me um, the design of computer system by Andrew Tannenbaum type of books. Like um, very fundamental. Even though they go even deeper on algorithmic side of things, I think those books are still important. Those things are just to give you edge on understanding certain things. Will it makes you will it help you to get the like first job if you're trying to just get into this community? Probably not. Maybe it's like overkill. um these days you just need to have some understanding of certain technologies, plus you need to have some successful projects in order to get paid for the jobs. But to be better on the craft that you are, I think the knowing this type of books, like fundamental good books, even books of Donald Knuth, you know those things are full of formulas and some of the mathematical explanation of some algorithmic stuff, but it definitely will give you edge and it makes you a little bit more uh, well versed in the subject and understanding how certain algorithms works. Some people like to say that um, certain technologies are indistinguishable from magic, but once you know how the things work, for example, like how those systems that generate images are work and what's the algorithm they use to train neural engine, and after that like speed up the beautiful images of some like a fantastic um, landscapes. You will understand that this is not just a magic, it's just like a well crafted tech that was spent time to train this neural network, and that's how you get the result. So they are not absolutely necessary. If you can go through the boot camp and learn from the tutorial and learn design of, I don't know, React app and how the app talks to API. But it will make you better, um, like software engineer in future if you would know these things. um,
Yeah.
there's a there's a saying about the mechanical sympathy. It's kind of like thing that came from racing world, when the driver, if driver doesn't have to be like a good mechanic, but it absolutely gives it them edge when they will understand what is going on. So it will make them make the better decisions about certain things that they do on track.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more you abstract development away from sort of the like core level,
Yeah,
in many ways, like the less developers understand what's going on, and so you're increasing, accessibility and ease of use, but you're decreasing, internal understanding. Like when I started out programming, I was learning C, and I don't write C every day, but knowing how all of that works, like memory management and things like that, have come into handy surprisingly often, even when debugging like modern languages like JavaScript. So there are some like foundational concepts that don't change very often or ever.
absolutely. Yeah, and those things are specifically to troubleshooting when you have a understanding of the end-to-end system. Maybe this is the my like a consultant background tells me, like when you come on customer on site, you would be expected to know everything about everything. So we'll try to investigate the problems like on the spot. So having this understanding of the things, how the things work, would definitely help. Like how to JVM works and how to JVM translates this on the native code, and maybe even more important things around. Since right now I'm in the world of APIs, and APIs are involved with network communication, understanding network systems, and how the things abstracted out, all this kind of like a network model of the OCI, and how the bits and bytes, all this kind of like a fluctuations of the current uh, turns into the things that we have like a video stream or audio stream and all these kind of things, how those things are abstracted from the signals
Mhm.
to the point where it's going to be packets, and after that it's going to be meaningful pieces of the information that we're sending over the wire. That's exciting, and the things that you understand. um Another problem that might happen when people will just solely focus on just the frameworks and things like that, I think this is what described as a singularity. At some point
Mm.
there would be no people who understand how the underlying system work. There would be people know how to operate those systems. And this is again, we're getting back to the world of magic. The if the people don't know like all the things that happens inside, we might have a situation that the people will be relying on tech so much, or relying on the tech, that they don't understand how it works. Um, it's reminds me one of my all-time favorite sci-fi show with Stargate,
Mhm.
and how from when the human encountered Goa'uld, which they were thinking that they were the race that created the gates, but the gates was created by another race, and the Goa'uld just basically was smart enough to know how to operate, but they didn't know how to build this, and they didn't know how it worked, and they just used this. So um, the same thing that if you don't have like a fundamental learnings about the computer science, that leads us to these type of situations when um,
Do you think that that is actually going to come true? Like I'm kind of a skeptic about it. When I think about the future of, let's call it, technical work broadly,
mhm, mhm.
um, it is certainly going to be different. Uh, but does that different necessarily mean that people understand less about how it works? Like maybe a good example here is like, I'm not writing assembly. Do I need to understand assembly? I don't know. Maybe not. Like the tools are good enough that you move up a layer, but you still have a pretty foundational understanding of the concepts behind it, even if you don't understand the code itself. Maybe it doesn't matter.
Sometimes sometimes I like to do this kind of like a mental exercise, like what would happen if I would be like a travel back in time and like hundreds of years back. Would I found the use of my current knowledge of computer science and the things in that time? Will I be able to translate this into something that would be remotely kind of resemble some of the things? It depends how far in the past you will be sent, because sometimes you will be just like burned on the on the campfire, because
Yeah,
you will be
you're not going to be
research.
mining silicone with
Yeah,
a bunch of cavemen.
yeah. But like during the times of, I don't know, the 1800s, something like that. How you would get use of your knowledge of the things. If you would just know the JavaScript frameworks, but do not quite understand how computer works, will you still be able to kind of like continue this research? Um, but um, but also it's also in the world of like a mechanic and in the world of the electronics and things like that, right? So we don't understand how those things work right now, like how this thing work, like how all this power packed here. I have no idea. I know how to program this because the smarter people put the API around this, so I can build my Swift apps or like Objective C apps to run those. I'm wondering if the people in the hardware world will also like have the similar kind of aspirations about, okay, so what's going to happen if the people don't know how the binary logic works, how the transistors are work, because we do have like so much um, more powerful things to compute. So the learning about the binary logic and transistors maybe not uh, that benefit to build the next. I don't know what's the current state of the processor process. I don't know, like 6 nanometers or like 5 nanometers. I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, like a mental exercise, but
Right.
more of philosophical aspect rather than practical.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. Um, and with APIs, like arguably that is the most powerful thing about APIs is that they abstract very complex functionality in a way that a lot of different people can take advantage of, right? Like,
Precisely.
talking
Absolutely.
about Kong, like
Yeah.
I have no idea how Kong works under the hood, but it
Yeah.
does some really impressive things. Like where do you see that sort of like learning curve happen for your developers? Like, do they care about how it works? Do they just want to use it? What are people doing there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there's always different layers how the people approach new system and learning about new system, and I will try to share some of like my things how I approach learning the things. So essentially, there is a approach of you just use the thing. You just use the thing how it's prescribed, and you don't really need to think about this, like how it does it. Usually it's only when something is not working you're trying to investigate, okay, so what is not working. So I was doing everything as I was told to do, and I don't quite understand why the thing that it's supposed to be working is not working. So now I need to go a little bit like going slightly down. You need to go in and understand like what is not working, what exactly you're trying to do. So it's the second layer when you trying to investigate the system. So you're trying to debug the system that's supposed to be doing whatever thing. And with this debugging, you starting understanding a little bit more about the system. It brings us to the point where, okay, so is at the essence the car should take me from the point A point B, but for some reason this car is not moving. So what I was doing, everything that I was prescribed, I pressed the button, I pressed the brake, I switched to drive, and it's supposed to be going, but it's not. So now it goes to time. You either you need to go to bring this to mechanic that will explain everything if you're interested in this type of jazz, or you just like try to roll your sleeves and try to figure out yourself like what is not working. Um, and for certain things, like when you there's another aspect like the troubleshooting, and definitely a really big um, the the thing that makes things moving. But what if you want to do something that the system is not quite designed to do? It's another approach. So you want to do some sort of customization on your car. You want to install different the audio system that is would be like more to your taste or more to your liking. And same thing with the systems like Kong. It needs to be like extensible enough so the people would do the things that were not be designed for 95% of the people, and 5% people would be interested in doing this. It's like when we go into world of like extending, providing like a plugins and learning how the things work inside. And once you go into world of the plugins, it's more like, okay, so now you need to program against the platform and what kind of knobs available for the platform. It would be up to developers of this platform to expose this information through SDKs or API docs. Um, things I mentioned with Microsoft SDKs back in the day. I also learned quite later in my world. I was fascinated with all this API available. However, there was a guy named Jeffrey Richter and Mark Rusinovich. Mark Rusinovich right now is the CTO of Azure. So, but he started as a kind of like a systems engineer and writing about books about the Windows internals. Apparently, not all APIs that were exposed, they were available, they were exposed through the public sources. So they were like digging inside and learning. This is what like a third level appears. There's some of the things that you want to do in the system, you understand system better, but you see some of the uh, guardrails that the developers put around in order to prevent, I don't know, people from doing stupid things, which is always the case. And people trying to do stupid things, usually something interesting happens. Um, and yeah, and this is how you kind of like go into to depths on the platform. Um, uh, with the example of Microsoft Windows, it was difficult to do. You need to have a lot of skills to understand how to debug on low level assembly, how to debug all these things. With things like Conk, it's slightly easier uh, because um, it's not that complex as operating system, but also it's open source. It's the most widely used open source API gateway, and you can go read the sources. There's a huge community where you can ask the question. Again, I'm trying to recall to my previous statement about it's good to know someone who can explain the things. Now we have the whole internet that can or at least like a subset of internet of people who know how it works and can explain what exactly happened in the moment when the request comes in and you're trying to do something with this HTTP request, right? So it's definitely things are getting much better for these days developers who try to learn the things with open source, with all the communities, the things that you guys doing with the major league hacking and stuff like that, like trying to educate the people and help other companies to build the platforms where the people can learn the things. So it is much better. It is much better, and even the companies like Microsoft, they'll continue to evolve the way how they approach the things. Right? We talked a little bit about that. Microsoft switched to open source model. They they are monitor some open source community. GitHub now part of the Microsoft is the largest social network for developers, and yeah, so
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I always feel like working with developers, especially
uh-huh.
on a developer platform,
Yeah,
is this like really unique double-edged sword, right? Because your customers could potentially understand more about the technical aspects of what you do than you do.
yeah,
And so you have to build things in such a way that people like feel comfortable with it and understand it and on some level understand how it works because
hmm
they're building it into their own products. And I would imagine that's, doubly true with something like Kong, where it's like API management, but it's like for people who are building APIs, like they might know a lot more about APIs than you do. And, you know, people are poking around, they're trying to figure stuff out, they're trying to break things. And it means that you have to have this like these different levels of depth that you can get to with using and understanding the
that's why you
platform.
have
And
developer relations. That's why you
exactly.
have developer relations to bring back some of the brighter things as a part of feedback. You
Yep.
see when the people struggling or they breaking things on purpose or they creating custom builds of certain things.
Yep.
Maybe we're doing not a very very good job to providing them what they actually need to fulfill their duties. So that's where developer relations comes into play and become a bridge between the actual company that provides the software as a software or software as a service or whatever, and the community.
Yeah. It's like
Learning,
trying to build a car that mechanics will be happy with.
yeah, yeah. It's like you have like a spokesperson that deeply understand what drivers are doing and what the mechanics are doing and how they would come together. But also you have a little bit more background on understanding, first of all, like all the mechanics of the car. Plus, you understand the mechanic of the business, plus
Mhm.
you understand the deeply how the system works, so you can talk the same way to your drivers and to your mechanics. So I'm not saying it's easy job, but hey, we need to learn a lot of things, and a lot of things comes from expertise and experience. How
Yeah.
to, even right now, in order to explain some of the concept, you see, we're using metaphors, and those
Mhm.
metaphors people can easily understand, even though if they may not doing anything with API, but they would understand that, okay, yeah, there's a API called like a steering wheel, there's API called um the the I don't know, brake, gas, and all these kind of things. Like
Yeah.
that's how you combine those APIs, and this is the result is car is moving.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. Um, so the last thing I'd love to cover here is, some of your work has to do with delegating some of this like community and ownership to other people, right? You have a contributor program. Obviously, with any open source project, there's stakeholders from outside of your company
Hmm.
participating in it. How do you kind of ensure that there's alignment there and that people are, trying to, I don't know, like learn and teach these concepts within the confines of your, product?
Dealing with it's always tricky when you're dealing with money and something that not involve money 100%. So that's where the open source contribution comes into play, right? So you need to be some of the things that people like to do, because they're excited, because they are fascinated, because they are like to do, they like the product and they want to make it better. It's something that you cannot put the price tag. So that's why the for us it's extremely important to have contributor communities is healthy, so they understand that the things that they do, or things what we do as a company, as a vendor, will not hurt this community as well. For us it is the bigger part of success of the Cone as a company, and the Cone Gateway as a product, um, uh, which also will include, I don't know, like success of service mesh like Kuma, is also part of our journey. Those people who contributed to our success, we are treat them with respect. So that's why when we're releasing some of the new features, we're not only doing, okay, so we will allow some people to do open source, and all this like a juicy stuff will go in for the people who have a big credit cards, or they have like a big chunks of money, which is not fair, because this is the and like having this delicate balance between like enterprise features and open source features, it is always tricky. So, and there's a lot of what we do, especially when we're interviewing like new people. We like to have and like to find the attitude that understand that the open source is not just a place where we can just grab some stuff and put this in enterprise things, but it's a living and breathing thing that exists. I like this saying, that why open source is important for us is, every time when users not using our open source stuff, they will be using somewhere else's open source. And it is okay when the users are building stuff based on the open source. It is totally fine. It's just, for us, it would be greater success if we explain and show how they can be successful with open source, with our open source, rather than cripple our open source and push them towards like a commercial aspect. Because in this case, it will create the opposite effect. Usually, if the people would be pushed to commercial thing, they will just like drop it at all. They will just go to somewhere else. So it's always delicate. It's in general terms, it's very hard to kind of like explain all these things without bringing some examples. But in general, uh, the future on open source side of things of Conk is also bright. our leadership and the project management and product management understand this. One of the like largest features that were released in open source, in the last release were an open source, like advanced routing, support with open telemetry, the things that are essential for many people to use. And the goal of developer relations and goal of like good community the management is to turn those open source users into customers, ideally, or champions. You know, developers are so important for the companies that many people understand that developers may not be able to close the deal. So, like, they will not be able to swipe the credit card. But developers definitely have a power to kill the deal, because if there's these days, especially these days, if developers don't like the stuff that they use, or they have like a stuff that has a bad reputation, bad community, they can find the stuff that they're just not going to use it. That's what happened, and that's why for us it's important to have this very healthy community.
Yeah, wise words. So my last question, I always like to end on a fun one. I feel like we've covered a lot of really good ground, and it seems like you kind of have, you know, you're on the pulse of like general tech trends, sci-fi, all of that stuff. If there was anyone in the world, you know, that you could take to lunch, like a technologist, a founder, a writer, you know, who would that be?
I would really love to have a lunch with Isaac Asimov.
Oh yeah.
Probably because he's one of my favorite sci-fi writers. And others on the other spectrum of my like sci-fi writers who alive would be Jeremy Robinson. He's also like modern sci-fi writer, and his approach to sci-fi in the popular culture is super close to me. It's like, I don't know, Zack Snyder meets James Gunn,
Yep.
with all the craziness that happens in his books. And I am almost done with Infinite Timeline. It's kind of like his overarching crossover. But also there's very interesting, deep thoughts about general computer science, specifically about AI and simulation. Are we living in simulation, and how to distinguish if you live in a simulation, and bringing some of the interesting real world like axioms or fundamental laws of math and physics, and understand all this kind of things. So I like the this kind of like depth and the width of the of this. So I think that would be very cool. And that's why I also like the Asimov, because of the depth of his like a vision.
Mhm. I mean, he creates an
That
incredible universe, like
yeah,
Foundation, Robots, Empire, like the whole mega series was one of my
exactly.
favorite growing
Exactly,
up. Yeah.
exactly. And you know, he created this the multi book universe before it was a because before it was a thing, you know.
Yeah.
He come up with this idea, okay, so I will, something was missing, and how he closed the basically foundation circle with some of the things that he wrote in the iRobot series. And
Mhm.
um, what was the about the detective and the robot? I forgot the
Yep.
name of.
Yeah, the whole Caves of Steel, like robot
Yep,
series.
exactly. Yes, yes, perfect. Yeah. So that
Awesome.
would be my.
I like it, man. Well, thank you. I'll have to check out some of those books, and I appreciate everything you shared today. I really enjoyed our conversation. If y'all are listening and you enjoy the podcast, please, you know, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tune in for more episodes. But thank you again, Victor, and happy hacking.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. It was great to be here. My name is Viktor Gamov, and as always, have a nice day.
The State of Developer Education is brought to you by Major League Hacking, or MLH. To find out more about MLH and how we power innovation, cultivate developer communities, and teach technical skills to students around the world, visit mlh.io. And then make sure to search for Developer Education in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at MLH, thanks for listening and helping us empower the next generation of technologists. Happy hacking!